I will never tell my parents the truth about how my grandparents died. They wouldn't believe me if I did. You may not either. A month ago, I had just gotten out of class when I noticed a missed call and a voicemail from my father. He rarely called, so I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how bad it really was. Jake, we've booked a flight for you. You need to come home tonight. Something terrible has happened. Call me when you get this. That was all the voicemail said. I called him back, and he explained that my grandfather had died in a horrific accident with his combine while harvesting corn, and the shock of finding him had triggered a fatal heart attack in my grandmother. The flight home was excruciating. The cramped space and my inability to smoke added to my anxiety. I spent the entire flight pacing back and forth, trying to distract myself. My dad was already waiting when I landed, ruining my plan to sneak a quick cigarette before seeing him. He hugged me tightly, and I loaded my bag into the car. I couldn't wait any longer, and lit a cigarette in the parking garage. He watched me silently. I expected a lecture, but he just nodded. "That's a nice lighter," he said. I realized I was still fidgeting with it. I handed it to him. Rachel, my girlfriend, found it in an antique store in Seattle. He examined the vintage trench lighter before handing it back. "No smoking in the car. Your mother would flip." I threw the cigarette down, stomped it out, and got in. An hour later, we pulled up to my parents' house. My mother hugged me, then looked me over. "Your father used to sneak menthols at your age too," she said, giving him a knowing smile. We spent the evening catching up. Eventually, Dad explained the funeral arrangements. Both caskets would be closed due to the extent of my grandfather's injuries and to avoid questions about my grandmother. The next morning, we attended the sparsely attended funeral. Afterwards, back at the house, my father dropped the news I wasn't expecting. "Jake, we've decided to sell the farm. We can't afford the upkeep, and it's not worth the hassle. If you can take a week off school to clear it out and get it ready to sell, we'll give you 25% of whatever it sells for." I chewed thoughtfully on a bite of chicken. "I can manage that. How bad is it?" Dad exchanged a look with Mom before she spoke. "Your grandfather was diagnosed with dementia before he died. The place is probably in bad shape. You haven't been out there? We've been working 7 days a week at the shop. We just haven't had time." The next day, Dad drove me to the farm. The sight of the old, decrepit place brought back unsettling childhood memories. As we pulled up, I noticed a massive scarecrow looming over the edge of the field. It was unsettling, almost menacing. "When did they get that?" I asked. Dad didn't answer. His face tightened, and he glanced at it from the corner of his eye, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. After he dropped me off, I wandered through the cluttered house, sorting through the overwhelming mess of knickknacks and family relics. Suddenly, the landline rang, startling me. It had been ages since I'd heard one. "Hey, this is Roy. I'm delivering the boxes you ordered, but I can't find your place. Directions? Take Old County Road 5 miles, then a right at the dirt path. You'll see a scarecrow. Turn there." Half an hour later, I was washing a disgusting pile of moldy dishes when I heard a blood-curdling scream from the cornfield. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. I rushed outside, peering into the endless rows of corn. The sun-bleached stalks swayed eerily in the breeze. "Hello?" I shouted, stepping cautiously into the field. The dry leaves crackled underfoot. I heard the scream again, closer this time. Heart pounding, I pushed through the brittle stalks. And then, in the distance, I saw something move, a shadowy figure darting between the rows. I broke into a run, desperate to catch up. I thought it might be someone who needed help. Suddenly I slammed into something hard and fell back, dazed and bleeding. I looked up to see the scarecrow towering above me, its stitched mouth grinning maliciously. It wasn't supposed to be here. It was near the road, not deep in the field. The scarecrow's head twitched. I scrambled to my feet, blood streaming from my nose. I had to be imagining things. It was just a lifeless thing filled with straw. But then, its head turned slowly toward me, its button eyes glinting in the fading light. Panic surged through me. I turned and ran, crashing blindly through the corn. I didn't stop until I stumbled out onto the driveway, just as a truck skidded to a halt inches from my feet. "What the hell, kid?" the driver shouted as he jumped out. He was burly, mid-40s, with a look of incredulity on his face. I hit my head," I stammered. "Got lost." He eyed me suspiciously but helped me up. "You're lucky I didn't run you over. I'm here to deliver the boxes." I nodded numbly as he helped me carry the boxes inside. As he left, he glanced back at the field. "Weird place. Crop looks great this year, though must have been some trick." After he left, I found a letter my grandmother had written. "L.A. Something is very wrong. Your father's dementia is getting worse. But it's more than that. This spring, a stranger came by with a scarecrow, claiming it would bring us a bountiful harvest. Your father refused at first, but the man insisted it was a gift. Now your father believes the scarecrow controls the crop, and that it won't let him harvest it. He says it's watching him, moving when he's not looking. I'm scared, Eli. Please come home. I think something terrible is happening." "Mom?" My blood ran cold as I read the letter. I wasn't the only one who had seen the scarecrow move. I wasn't imagining things. My grandfather's paranoia was real. I went outside, needing air. I lit a cigarette, trying to calm my nerves. The wind chimes clinked softly, but the sound did nothing to soothe me. And then I saw it. The scarecrow, now standing at the edge of the field, closer than before. Before I could process it, the scarecrow fell from its post, almost leaping down. It grasped the wooden pole and began running toward me, the long post raised like a spear. I froze, my cigarette dropping from my mouth. It hurled the post with impossible strength. The sharp end tore through the wind chimes and embedded deep into the wall beside me. I bolted, adrenaline surging through me as I raced toward the old barn. I could hear the scarecrow's feet pounding the ground behind me, closing the distance. I barely made it inside and grabbed a pitchfork. It burst through the door seconds later, its stitched mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. I lunged forward, jabbing the pitchfork into its chest. The tines sank deep, but the scarecrow didn't even flinch. It grabbed my arm with a vice-like grip, yanking the pitchfork from its chest as if it were nothing. I struggled, desperate, my fingers closing around my lighter. I flicked it open and thrust the flame at its straw-stuffed body. Flames erupted instantly, racing across its form. The scarecrow released me, staggering back, its body writhing as the flames consumed it. It turned and fled, disappearing into the cornfield, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. The field went up in flames, the dry stalks igniting like kindling. By the time the fire department arrived, the entire field was ash. They wrote it off as an accident, citing the over-dry crops. My father saw the scorched post lodged in the wall and asked no questions. We both knew what had happened, but we didn't speak of it. We never will, because some things are too horrifying to explain, and even more horrifying to believe.